Welcome to part 2 of making the Mean Girls Christmas outfit out of yarn. In today's video, we'll be crocheting the skirt. Ever since I started this 2-part project, Jingle Bell Rock has been the soundtrack to my life, and I cannot wait for it to stop playing. Like with the knit top, I had to experiment a little with the yarn. Although it worked well using only 4mm needles, that didn't mean the same would apply to crochet. And what do you know? It didn't. For some intuitive reason of a higher plane, I chose to use a 5mm hook to swatch with, and I also decided to go with the half double crochet waistcoat stitch. It's my favourite crochet stitch, and I only just discovered it a few months ago while trying to crochet a different mini skirt. Anyway, I also tried using a 4mm hook, but that really sucked. With the stitch malarkey out of the way, it was time to start chaining. I used a low rise waist measurement, and given that my sampling had hardly any stretch, I wasn't too worried about it loosening up, but I was still worried, if you know what I'm saying. In case you were wondering, I'll be making the waistband separately because having to frog your entire project to fix a messed up waistband is a harrowing experience. I may as well mention it because the footage took up so much space. I basically tried crocheting my first row into both loops of the chain, and I really don't remember it ever being this difficult. Nothing is happening here. Not even a third of the way through, I called it quits and just crocheted as normal and only one loop. Devastatingly, despite my best efforts, my work was way too long. Although it was perfect for the stand, it overlapped on me by several centimeters. But, and this is why I really love making things freehand, I had a fix in mind, and I was going to bank on it. Was this rush comparable to the one you also get from gambling? Yes, very much so. Regardless,
Hit me, I'm all in.
the skirts from the movie appeared to be mini skater skirts. They didn't seem to have the same yardage as the circle skirts, but were far too flared to be A-line. They also appeared to fit quite closely at the top before flaring, so I kept my increases at 0 for a few inches. Little did I realise. Once I crocheted down to just before the widest part of the hips, I joined my work in the round and started my increases. And I'm just going to stitch these two parts together, and then I'm going to continue in the round. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook so it goes through both V's on either side. And let me tell you about the bet I made. Instead of just joining the edges together in the round, I allowed for an overlap that was precisely the same area as the excess fabric. In doing so, not only did I solve my sizing issue, I also created a placket for the skirt fastening. We'll get into that more later on. In terms of increases, the plan was to start out with a few and gradually increase the number. So we now have two V's coming out of the same V, and that's it. These two parts here are going to act as the placket fastening. So I think I'm probably going to add some poppers here, because otherwise I'll have to add some additional buttonholes. I don't really want to do that because it'll just add to the thickness. In terms of increases, I don't think I've made enough. I'm going to start making some more. Ew. It's not looking good. Okay, I get why the stitch never quite blew up. Having to constantly check the other side to see if it went through the second V is tiresome. But still, the stitch gets rid of almost every other issue I have with crocheting, and the stitches are super easy to read once made. But in case you ever forget that you are in fact crocheting, you still have to undo everything to fix a mistake. Stating the obvious here, but once the skirt can fit over the widest hip measurement, any increase afterwards is more aesthetic than anything else. In another manner of speaking, the limit does not exist. One more time and it's a hat trick. Actually, the limit does exist, and I may have exceeded it. This is my progress so far. That's how big the round is. I don't think I'm going to add any more increases, but it might still be a possibility. So I have the leftover DK yarn from the top, and there's not a lot there. Maybe, I'd say less than 50 grams here. This is another ball of yarn. Obviously this isn't a full ball either, and it's very dusty. It's probably less than 50 grams as well, but I also have this one. Hopefully this will go a bit further, but it is a lot thicker than the first one. So I think all three of these are completely different weights. My current feeling is that I should start with the thickest and then end with the thinnest, and just so there's a nice gradient, but it actually might end up being the other way around, so we'll have to see. It is very structured. Will it drape the way I want it to? Maybe, maybe not. Initially, I was afraid of increasing too quickly, but the reality was that my mind outran my crocheting, lapping it by miles. Was this avoidable? Yes. Did I avoid it? No. Have I learned a lesson? One can only hope. However, for this project I decided to just continue, partly because time was of the essence, but mostly because I still wanted to see how it would turn out. There is still potential. Let's just be okay with that. Potential fact of the day. While I was doing research for this project, I noticed that the lengths of each of the plastic skirts were different, in a way that seemed very much intentional, as if it was a very 2000s take on the hemline index. And before I could even say "you can't sit with us," I was almost out of yarn. The real question was, could I sit in this? Oddly enough, I was kind of into this silhouette. Whether or not it would work with the outfit, I wasn't sure. The work ended up pretty structured, even with the larger hook size, and it didn't drape that loosely. Nonetheless, we were moving forward with it. Fortunately, the loop stitch also exists in crochet, and so that's what I used for the quote fur trim, since it would match what I had already done for the knit top. It didn't take long to get the hang of it, and it was easier than the knit, though not by too much. And I really like it. I'm just gonna keep working in the round. I have to work on the wrong side because the loops end up on the back of the work. Just to go through how I do this loop stitch really quickly. I'm doing this really loosely because this is a 4mm needle, and then afterwards I'll probably switch to a 5 or a 6 depending on how thick the other yarn is. I'm gonna insert my hook, put it over the yarn, grab the back, hold the loop in place, yarn over, pull through, then single crochet, insert hook, place over yarn, grab the back, pull through, hold loop down, yarn over, pull through. That's funny, I didn't realize I was making Jessie's hat from Toy Story 2. Yeehaw. For the belt, I'm going to use this leftover yarn from my t-shirt project. I actually don't think it's going to be enough, but yeah, my estimations have been pretty off so far, so we'll see. After a couple of very awkward fittings, I decided that I was going to make the skirt high-waisted instead of the initial low-rise, because who was I kidding? I wasn't trying to make a drop-waist peplum skirt, although they might be making a comeback. Shock horror. Joking aside, lifting the skirt allowed the increases to blend in more nicely. To really cinch in the waist, I used a DK yarn with a 4mm hook, as well as regularly spaced decreases, all in single crochet. Luckily, this made the top band of rounds without increases look less jarring, and to tell you the truth, I was beyond relieved, although my perfectionism gremlin was still hanging on for dear life. Get off. I sometimes forget how much the hook and yarn together can really make or break your crocheting experience. This yarn was much slicker than the red, and I would probably describe it as the difference between mercerized and brushed cotton respectively. Combined with the coated, handleless hook and a pencil hold, it was probably the smoothest and the fastest I'd worked in a really long time. This will come as no surprise, but I decided to crochet the bow separately to the waistband. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to pull it off, but I had a rough idea that it would be made in 3 parts. The first attempt in making the main bow part was too short, and the second was just plain wrong in terms of ruching placement, but I still had a use for it. Eventually, I was left with a dodgy bow tie and a long mustache. These are the 2 pieces I've just crocheted for the bow. There is a third piece, but I'll show you what that is. So this one is supposed to be the 2 strands that hang down from the main bow. So I'm going to fold them over like this. And this one is the main bow. So I alternated between slip stitching in the top stitch and slip stitching in the stitch below. I'm going to fold it over like so, and I'm going to crochet this end together. And then I'm going to crochet another strip to wrap everything together, and it will be the middle of the bow. So for the strip, I think I'm going to chain about 4 stitches. Here is the bow, and it looks pretty scraggly right now, so I'm just going to tidy it up a bit, and then I'm going to stitch it into the waistband. After sewing the bow into the waistband, I only had the fastenings left to finish things off with. I ended up going with 2 poppers, followed by a hook and eye closure at the top. And that was it. I had finally completed the outfit. Apart from the Santa hat, of course, but it's not like I have a head or anything. Overall, I'm pleased with how the skirt turned out, although I would definitely space out the increases better next time. It was cool to see how the stockinette and loop stitch from the knit top were able to be translated into crochet, and I think both items are pretty cohesive with each other, perhaps even more so than the original set, but that's a pretty neutral statement. And that's about as much holiday spirit as I'm able to muster up this year. Oh wait, I almost forgot. Okay, that's enough. I really hope you enjoyed this 2-part series, and if you haven't already, you can watch the first part here. Thank you so much for watching. Happy holidays!